Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. If you are local Houston, thanks for joining us on this stormy evening. It looks like something's clearly blowing through tonight. But we are so excited for tonight's event. But before we get started, I wanted to just do some general store announcement stuff. First, for everybody, I am John McDougall. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. As I said, we're super excited about this event. As we were talking beforehand, every time Lisa's come to the store, we've talked about how we always brought in the nonfiction essay collections that she and Francesca wrote together. So we always talked about how at some point we need to get them to the store together. So we're excited that even virtually that we can get them here in Houston together to chat. But before I bring them out, I wanted to just make a couple of quick store announcement things. So first up, I wanted to let everybody know that we are open. We reopened on Halloween. So if you haven't been in the store in a while and you're local, come visit us. We'll be happy to put some books in hands. We're still encouraging masks if you come in the store, and we've lifted the 6-person minimum requirement. So if you want to come see us, we do know that there are still some people who are still doing curbside pickup. So if you would prefer curbside pickup, you can always just give us a call when you pull into the parking lot, and we're happy to run books out to you. We've got so much stuff coming up. We have 9 official Murder by the Book virtual events this week. And then tomorrow we're launching our partnership with Sarah DeVello of Mystery and Thriller Mavens. So she is going to be chatting on the store's Facebook and YouTube tomorrow at 2 Central with Maureen Johnson, and then 3 Central with Laura Lippman, and she's got a great lineup as well. So I hope that you guys will come back and check those out. Also tomorrow night, we're going to be chatting with Joe Lansdale. His new book will be out, and he's going to be dropping by to sign copies for us. So if you haven't pre-ordered, you can do that. So if you have not checked out murderbooks.com to see our complete event schedule, please definitely do that. You can also always follow us on Facebook, and if you subscribe to notifications, you will get a notification every time we go live. But tonight we're so excited. We're going to be chatting with Lisa Scottoline, whose book Eternal. We still have a handful of signed copies, so if you have not picked up your copy yet, we do still have signed copies. And we're celebrating the release of Francesca Serritella's novel Ghost of Harvard, which actually it comes out tomorrow officially in paperback. We have copies of both in hand, so you can always visit us at murderbooks.com to order copies, or you can give us a call at 713-524-8597. But I'm going to get us started. I'm going to bring Lisa out. How are you tonight, Lisa?
John, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
It's so good to see you. We say that, it's these virtual events have been really great because we're able to connect readers with other authors that they might not get to see. As I was saying, we get to, our customers who have bought signed books from us before who have never gotten to see an in-store event kind of get to see what we do. But the downside is we don't get to hug you when you come.
I know, my hugs. I write a book to get the hugs, but this is second best, and I'll take it because it's so good to see you and you look terrific.
Thank you. You do too. It's always, it's always such a treat when you come to the store, and we've been hosting you since the days when you would send tasty cakes to the store. And so it's so wonderful to be able to do this virtually. And like we said beforehand, to get you and Francesca together. So I'm going to get you officially introduced. So for any of you who are tuning in who might not know, Lisa Scottoline is the New York Times-bestselling author of 32 novels. She has 30 million copies of her books in print in the U.S. and has been published in 35 countries. She also writes a weekly column with her daughter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Lisa has served as president of the Mystery Writers of America and has taught a course she developed, Justice in Fiction, at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, her alma mater, and she lives in the Philadelphia area. And as we mentioned, her newest book, Eternal, has been out for a little while, but we do still have signed copies if you haven't ordered. But she's going to be chatting this evening with Francesca Serritella, whose book, Ghost of Harvard, officially comes out in paperback tomorrow. How are you tonight, Francesca?
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having us. I mean, Murder by the Book is so close to my heart and our family, even though I've never gotten to visit in person, but I'm so happy that I can do this virtually instead. But just, you have supported my mom and our family from, like you said, from the Tasty Cake days when we were exporting Pennsylvania culture. So this is such an honor, and just, I've dreamed of it, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, it's such a treat for me too. Like you said, I mean, I feel like I know you already. I've heard your mom talk about you for so long. It's so nice to actually be able to do this. And when Ghost of Harvard came out in hardcover, my coworker Brenda absolutely loved the book. We did, but it came out in that weird phrase where we weren't kind of up and running on virtual events yet. So when we realized that the paperback was coming out, we emailed the publicist and we're like, look, we didn't get to do something for the hardcover. We're so excited. We have to do something. We want to do something with Lisa. We wanted to get the two of you together at the store in some way forever. So I'm so excited that we get to do this evening.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I am so excited. And of course, the big news is we're wearing the same earrings. I just realized.
Oh,
Mother-daughter earrings. Mother-daughter earrings.
copies me, but it's okay.
Thank you so much, John.
So Francesca is the New York Times bestselling author of the 9-book series of essay collections co-written with her mother, bestselling author Lisa Scottoline, and based on Chick Wit, their Sunday column in the Sunday Philadelphia Inquirer. She graduated cum laude from Harvard University, where she won multiple awards for her fiction, including the Thomas T. Hoops Prize. Ghost of Harvard is her first novel. So before I turn it over to Lisa and Francesca to chat, if you guys are watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you have questions for either of them, please post those in the comments. You can post them in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook. We will get to them in just a little bit. And I also wanted to mention, just in case it happens, it hasn't happened in a while, but as you guys are watching, if you see any comments on Facebook asking you to click away from the event to put in your credit card info to watch it, that's spam. Don't do that. I will block those as they pop up, but I just wanted to give everybody a general warning just before I popped away to do that. So Lisa, I'm going to turn this over to you and let you guys chat, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate it. Well, this is the coolest thing ever. Let me take a quick thank you to Murder by the Book. I just hope that you guys know, those of you who are local know it, but people who are not, this is one of the best independent bookstores in the whole country. And you can order online or call them up. They have an amazing selection. They have great curated staff picks. And so please support them. We are in my family room, and this is my signed book collection. Most of it, in fact, all of it from independent bookstores. So please, we need independent bookstores. Please support them. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Fair enough, Francesca?
Absolutely.
Okay, now on to you. Well, you're my daughter. I think we had to make that clear. And this is a really big night. And since I feel so warm and friendly, well, most of the time, but especially with Murder by the Book, it's really cool for me to be able to present your paperback here because I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of this novel. I know how hard you worked on Ghosts of Harvard. And can we just say to this crowd that it's not just a mother talking, because it was nominated for Best First Novel by International Thriller Writers, which is such a huge honor. And so I'm very, very proud and so excited and, to talk about it tonight. Fair enough?
Everybody should be so lucky as to be introduced by their Italian mother. It's an experience. I highly recommend it. But yes, yeah, we have to like give my other non-mom cred. No, we'll just, you're a little bit biased in my favor. But.
Look, the reviews are wonderful, Washington Post, but you are best first daughter. So there you go. Well, what we're going to do, everybody, is sort of, since we both have a book out, we're going to interview each other. And then at the end, open it up to questions. We're not shy. So ask us anything, because truly, we both want you to get your questions answered. So just to start out, Francesca, why don't you tell us a little about Ghosts of Harvard? Why don't you tell these lovely people, doubtlessly lovely people, what it's about?
Ghosts of Harvard, it is a little bit of a genre bender. It has that psychological thriller pacing and stakes, but it also has, these ghost element, a little supernatural, a little historical, some spooky physics explanation. But I really think at the heart of this story, it is a family story. And that's because Ghosts of Harvard is about Katie Archer, who is really struggling in the aftermath of her beloved older brother's suicide. It happened while he was a student on Harvard's campus. And her brother was a genius. Her entire life, he was that gold standard by which she measured herself in every step of her life. And above all, really, he was her best friend. They were incredibly, incredibly close. But so he got into Harvard. He made it look easy. It seemed like his future was a guaranteed bright success, happiness, everything. But then while a student there, sadly, he developed mental illness, schizophrenia, and ultimately did not survive. Having this loved one who was her North Star then make this unfathomable decision and to lose him this way, Katie is just haunted by so many unanswered questions, and she knows the answers are only in one place, on Harvard's campus. So much to her parents', kind of horror and angst and worry, she decides to attend herself and piece together his final year armed only with an old notebook of his. And while she does so, starts to uncover, more questions than answers, and more frighteningly, begins to hear voices herself. And then the new question is Is she losing her mind like her brother? Or could these voices be something different? Could they be ghosts? And if she listens to them, will they give her those answers she craves and lead her to the voice she misses most, her brother Eric? Or are they just leading her down her own path of self-destruction? So that is the plot of Ghosts of Harvard.
You know what I love about that, particularly for an audience as sophisticated as this one with mysteries and thrillers, and as you say, it's a genre bender. And we'll talk a little about how genres are both help and hinder. But I think what's interesting about, most thrillers, a definition of a thriller is a protagonist in jeopardy.
Right.
And so here you have a protagonist who's in jeopardy, and it's so interesting because the jeopardy isn't external, it's internal. It's what is she losing her grip on reality and what will happen as a result of that. And I think that's what makes it so compelling, honestly. And to a certain extent, there's resonance throughout life. Like sometimes we are our own worst enemy, and the threats do come from within. So I think
I think I learned so much from watching you growing up, watching you build this incredible career, and I love reading thrillers myself. So for me, the genre wasn't a hindrance, but was a sandbox to play in. I know the parameters. I know what I can do to have fun in it, and I love the way that most mystery thrillers might begin with a death for which everyone is claiming innocence, but you're trying to guess who's guilty. And this is a book that begins with a death for which everyone feels guilty, and everyone is able to track and trace. Everyone is able to trace some thread of causality and some, what was that turning point that I missed, and where did I not do the right thing? And they're creating these parallel tracks in their mind of, these alternate realities of, what if I had done something different? Could I have saved my loved one? But in the case, we have to figure out what's the truth.
Right. And I love that. Because also, I think if you look at the genre over time, the modern thriller, the modern mystery has a lot of depth of characterization. And your book, the family has characterization. Although I'm nicer than the mom in the book, don't you think?
I think that this book is super not based on me, even though I did go to Harvard. It's not based on any real family, but absolutely, I think that this family, in an ideal world, a tragedy that affects an entire family, like the loss of a child, certainly like a suicide. In an ideal world, that would pull the family together. But grief is fundamentally isolating. And I think we've all gone through a year where we've all experienced grief in many different forms and seen others go through it in very acute ways and gone through it at such an isolated time during this pandemic. And you feel it just magnifies that trauma, because I really think the best antidote, or I don't mean to say grief is a poison, but the best balm to grief is community and is family and is all. And I, in this book, I was really exploring what happens when you're denied that, or when that's too complicated, either because of everyone's grieving their separate way or because of secrets and different things like that. And suicide especially. I think we've come a long way as a culture, as a society, especially campus culture, in trying to tackle it and trying to prevent it and understand it. But at the same time, I think wrongly, it still feels delicate to talk about. People are uncomfortable. They're more afraid of saying the wrong thing. They'd opt to say nothing, and it becomes more isolating further. And that's really where we meet this character.
Before we move on to Eternal, let's pause a second, because it would be natural at this point to sort of tell them what the inspiration was for this novel, because it was grounded to a certain extent in it's heartfelt.
Yeah, it was. Like I said, it's not based on any real family, but and I never thought I would write a book based on Harvard when I was a student there. But there was an experience that influenced me, and that's when I was a junior. A young man in my dorm died by suicide, and he wasn't a close friend, but he was someone I was used to seeing in the dining hall and giving a wave to, and most of all, someone I never ever would have suspected was suffering. And that's the cruelty with mental illness, is that somebody can be suffering from something that can be a terminal illness, and it's completely invisible. And, we were all shocked and saddened, but I don't think even my roommates and I, my most intimate friends, we were not really able to comfort one another or really talk about it. We just sort of compartmentalized it like people do. And then a year later, when I was a senior, I remember reading the Harvard Crimson newspaper, which is a school newspaper, and there was a little write-up about that young man's little sister had, in that year's time, learned to play guitar because her big brother was a musician. And even though she was only probably a high school senior at the time, she came to Harvard's campus and played a musical tribute to him on the anniversary of his passing. And I was just knocked back in my futon and stunned and thinking, what was that year like for her? Because for better, for worse, our community was maybe able to compartmentalize and put that in the, oh, such a shame, such a tragedy, I can't think about that blinders. That's not an option for a family. And there are certain types of grief for which the only way to process it is to go through it, go toward it. And I just was so moved by that sister's courage, by her love to come back to the place where it happened. It must be so frightening. But she did it for her brother's memory, and the way that the people we love live on and still guide us and guide our choices and guide our behavior. And I just never forgot that sister. So that's what inspired me to tell this story from a sister's perspective.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, because I do think you can feel the emotional truth of that when you read it.
Thank you.
There's a lot of layers to it. Well, it's true. It's absolutely.
Well, the little love fest, pride fest goes both ways, because I am so proud of you with Eternal. I mean, I always say, it was so inspiring to watch you build your career brick by brick. I was not born to a best-selling author, guys. I was born to a beginning one, and I watched her.
We're born to a broke one.
Build it. Okay, that too. But you know what? I didn't know it. It was fun. Yeah. But to see you build this incredible career, writing these great legal thrillers, domestic dramas, all that kind of stuff, where you had your groove. And then at the top of your game, your 30-something book, to try historical fiction and go a completely different way. But I know, as your daughter, I know this story was brewing in your heart for so long. I know you had been talking about it and thinking about it. So first tell everybody what it's about, and also what tipped you over the edge of now's the time.
Tipped you over the edge. I love that. Well, the title is Eternal, and the story in short is it's a love triangle set in fascist Italy that begins to darken as fascism takes root and the war comes on. I mean, that's really the headline. But to respond to something you said, because I think, and we can talk for a minute about what inspired it, but if you ask me, I don't think it's that different from what I've done before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, honestly, and just speaking to people who have read me before, that I've always written about family, and I've always written about law and justice, and about how law doesn't always lead to justice. In fact, how law can thwart justice. And the best example, or sadly, the most horrific example of that, is in, let's say, a time like fascism in Mussolini's Italy, where the law itself codified injustice. For example, there was a barrage of anti-Semitic laws that justified taking the property of the Jews and the Jews of Rome, and taking away their possessions and their homes, and preventing them from working, and ultimately stripping them of their citizenship in the fascist party, because Rome, amazingly, when it began, was not anti-Semitic in any way. Jews in Italy were 50% intermarriage rate. They were very well assimilated. The mayor of Rome was Jewish. And it's so interesting because, in fact, the Jewish community in Rome, in the so-called ghetto, is the oldest continuously existing Jewish community in Western civilization, which is kind of mind-blowing. And as soon as I thought about that, I said, this is very interesting. This is a very interesting confluence of how an unjust law will operate on families. And so really that's the kind of stuff that the Rosado series is about, and any other standalone I've written. So in a way, I think people in this group will understand that it is merely an extension of what I've always been doing. And I've already finished the next thriller, which is a straight up contemporary thriller, and that'll be out next April. But I loved doing this exercise. And really, as Francesca says, the story was born, quite briefly put, 40 years ago when I was in college. No, it's terrifying. But you guys knew that I was an old hag, so
Stop it! No, there's no male authors on here calling themselves old hags.
Oh, there's no male authors on here right now. But in any event, I appreciate that, honey. But I was lucky enough at Penn as an undergrad to have Philip Roth as a teacher. And he introduced us to the work of Primo Levi, who wrote all about the Holocaust in Italy. And I said, why don't I know about this? So 40 years I've been wanting to write about it. And I think, honestly, And those of you, thank you, because as Francesca says, you have supported me and our family from day one. And I think it's really important as an author, when you're writing anything, whether you're published or not, to try to follow things that interest you and the next logical thing that you would do. So I decided to give Eternal a try. Here it is. It's gotten wonderful reviews, and I'm really, really proud of it. So that's the story. But honestly, that little background of inspiration, I think, is a major tribute to teachers. And I hope there's teachers out there who will hear that. Because who would think that your teacher, even though he's famous, but still, that 40 years later, sadly, after he's gone, all that time I was thinking about, I'm going to write about it. If I ever get to be a writer, I'm going to write about that. And it's amazing the influence that teachers have on us and that we have on each other and that books have on readers and authors have too. It's all, I think it's, I've said this, it's all of a piece. That's what's so wonderful and kind of magical about books. Yeah. So that's the story of Eternal in a nutshell.
I remember you talking about that class. So I know the effect it had on you, and it's wonderful that this book is here. And it has that, it's still that Lisa Scottoline pacing. I'm still turning the pages. It's still.
Although let's tell them that they just have a little Francesca Serritella because she helped me edit the love scene.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Italian language. I thought we were keeping it PG.
Oh no, this is home. We're telling the truth, babes. We're not getting out. Remember you did. She's like, this guy needs more game. I'm like, what's game?
Yeah, she had all the guys being like all awkward cute, but there's really only so much that we can take. You don't go to Italy for awkward cute.
No, she definitely only was like, wow. I was like, this guy's.
I got your guys back.
Yes, exactly. And that's the whole point of the book. Elizabeth has to choose between these two guys, and we don't reveal who she chooses. But in any event, that's the underpinning. But so to go back to Ghosts of Harvard, very interesting because I think it's apropos talking about how these genres, to a certain extent, they're extensions. And hopefully, if you're any good, which you are, you're trying to really push that a little bit. But also, we know that you get a fair number of questions that are somewhat. I get a lot of questions about my research. Or you do. That part? Oh, all right. Let's talk about your research. That's a good idea. Because I know you did.
Some of our books are really research heavy.
We should narrow it down to because you did tons of research. What is the most surprising thing you learned in your research?
I did tons of research, but research is so fun with fiction because you get to just go toward whatever interests you the most.
Right.
And the three ghosts, they're from three different points in, American history, Harvard's history. And I wanted to explore what I feel like is the central wrench of losing someone to suicide is that loss of the potential. They didn't get to live out their life's potential. And maybe their potential was to get better. I think it was. They felt whatever, just all that, those feelings around the pressure to live up to your potential, that the duality of it. So I wanted to choose these figures from three different points where we saw potential thwarted. And, that led me to have a couple of the historical figures who deal with war, I think in different ways. War steals potential. But there's another way that potential is stolen and thwarted and just, not respected and that's racism. And I wanted to also show that Harvard, while it's most famous for some of its famous old white men, it's not the only people who built Harvard. And I always had this character who I knew I wanted to have a female ghost, and I knew I wanted to have her be a Black woman and deal with the way that racism and opportunity and motherhood in different times in our history. So I had this different character for the 8 years it took me to write this novel. I sold the novel with this other character, and she was born during the Reconstruction era, and it was like this interesting, real, true history of Harvard with these sort of weird, exploited female maids called goodies, and it was interesting and it was legit. But after I had sold it, after I had done What Editing Pass with Random House, like my dream had come true, I learned that Harvard is reckoning with and unearthing, really like rediscovered its history of having enslaved people on Harvard's campus. Not just on Harvard's campus, but in the home of the Harvard president. And it was 100 years before. It was in the 1730s through 1760s, right leading up to the very founding of our nation. So basically, while our nation's thought leaders were debating and discussing our core values of freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, they were being served by enslaved people. And they did not see that hypocrisy, or they chose not to see that hypocrisy. And I thought that was so interesting. And then I realized how in this weird way, I wrote this book all about this main character, the sister, and the way that we don't know what we don't know. And we create narratives of the past with this, our limited understanding of the history, not realizing that it's limited, we are shaping our future. And here I had this living example of it, where if you write about an exploited worker when there's a history of slavery that's been hidden for 300 years, then you're kind of not telling the truth. And so I asked my editor, I want to redo this research. I want to learn about colonial Boston now and colonial Boston slaves and how that was different from the Southern experience. And, I completely had to press pause, but God bless, they were so supportive of me. And it really only locked in better because it was just really the truer example of these themes and that I was interested in. And I rewrote this character to be one of the real life people who lived and sadly died while, living at the center of progress, enlightenment, and they had the least opportunity in the entire country.
Right. That's ironic.
Yeah. So, and I mean, my God, historical fiction. I had pockets of historical fiction in my book, but you had the entire thing. I mean, I know you went to Italy. Talk about your research.
Well, I ate all the pasta I could purely for research, and I hope you all agree to it. But it's interesting. If I were going to say one thing, because there was tons of research, and I actually think the book is fairly definitive, because there has never been before popular American fiction about what happened to the ghetto Jews in Rome. And I really wanted to fill that chasm. But what surprised me, though, was all these little stories that were actually sort of uplifting, because there was actually a real guy, for example, named Monsignor O'Flaherty, and he was at the Vatican. And while fascism was persecuting Jews, and then when Nazis came in and occupied Rome, he started taking Jews and giving them apartments in the Vatican. And then when they ran out of room in the Vatican, he rented them apartments under forged identities and forged papers all throughout Rome. And he was a real life person who did this. And it was kind of like, because the book is called Eternal. It's a lot about how time is a little bit conflated and what really abides. And that there's love is eternal as much as hate is eternal. And above all, it's love that the book is about, really. It's not just the romantic love of the characters and the girls and the boys, but the friendship of the boys. It's love of country. It's love of God. And I really wanted to explore that. But those little stories really leaven, I think, the horror of the time. And they're true as well. It's amazing. And I think it's a fun and cool thing about the book. So now you were right to correct me, because I did want to go back. Well, you can correct me. You're the only person in the world who can correct me, because I love you. Okay, let's talk about it, though, because what I was going to say was you do have this element in your novel about these voices, and we don't know if they're ghosts or not. And you leave that to the reader. But you commonly, because I've seen you on these book clubs when you were home during the pandemic.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure. I mean, one of the weird silver linings of this wacky year is that I couldn't do signings, but I really love and crave that connection with readers. And so these virtual events crop up, but also I've been Zooming with book clubs. I've Zoomed with countless book clubs since last summer. And it's been so gratifying and fun, and we laugh and we cry, but it's really insightful into what people are most interested and curious about with this book. And I have to say, I think the number one question I get asked, of course, I should have seen it coming, is, do you believe in ghosts? And my journey with this question, it's not an easy one for me to answer. I think by nature, I'm a skeptic. I love the debunking of paranormal shows. You guys know those shows on TV where they go to the haunted place, but then they actually find that it's an electromagnetic field, or the ghost ship is the reflection of the moon off the water. And this book has, if you're a skeptic too, this book has that. I gave this real quantum physics explanation that's plausible.
She did. It's impressive.
But it in this book, the ghosts are like voices, and that's sort of always how I imagined ghosts. Like when you walk into your childhood bedroom or something, and as an adult, you can almost hear your little kid voice. But during the course of writing this book, I think I had the closest thing I've ever had to a supernatural experience. And it wasn't anything like I had imagined, but it really had a profound effect on me. And that's a sad time, but a time that I cherish was when the last time before the pandemic that I moved home with you, Mom, was to care for and help care for my grandmother, our Mother Mary, who we wrote about so much in our essay books, during her period of hospice care at the end of her life. And we were lucky that we had about 4 months with her. And I was so lucky in this job that I was able to spend all of that in Pennsylvania with you guys and with her. And anybody who's gone through that knows it's like the most condensed emotional experience of your life. Like you laugh, you cry, you're angry, you're upset. Like it was just every human emotion into one period of time. And it was, but it's a time that will cherish. And we were so close growing up and during that time, everything. And toward the end, it really felt like the Mother Mary I knew had already kind of gone to a different plane, but she was hanging on and I just didn't want to miss a second with her. So I would sit by her bed all day, every day, until I absolutely had to go to sleep. And so it was another night that I was sitting up just by her bed with her favorite shows running, not watching them really, just staring into space. And I guess it was your brother, my uncle, and you were like urging me to go to bed around like after 2 a.m, honestly. And I went up to my bedroom right above the living room and I fell asleep because I was exhausted. And at some point I woke up and I felt like something, it really felt like ripping, like almost the sound of Velcro ripping, like just from like navel to throat, like this feeling. And I rushed to the bathroom. I thought I was going to throw up. Like I felt like, is this nausea? Am I going to heave? I couldn't, nothing happened. Like I just felt clammy and freaked out, but something woke me up with this enormous shock. And I don't know, I like drank a little water from the faucet and then tried to go back to bed. And then I heard my uncle downstairs with my grandmother going, Mom. And she had already passed. But that was the moment that she passed, was when I had this feeling of rupture. And, it took me a few days to process because, of course, there was some part of me that wanted to feel like if she was going to communicate with me, it would have been suffused with warmth and the laughter and the, those types of more positive feelings. But what I really think it was almost like my spirit clinging onto hers. And that's something I try to put into this book too, which is, ghosts don't haunt us, we haunt them. That connection is across planes of perception that we, cannot fully explain. And I think I held on to her until the very last moment. We didn't let go of each other easily, and something I really learned in my research is that there is nothing that a ghost hunter, a priest, a, sci-fi writer there's nothing that those people have thought of that a quantum physicist has not already taken very seriously. There is so much of the universe that we don't understand. There is so much of the universe we know is there, but we cannot perceive. So many more dimensions to our universe than we can perceive. So if you've ever had an experience you can't explain, It doesn't mean it wasn't real. Right. And that's my ghost experience.
That was really
Mary really left her is all throughout Eternal. I mean, her influence is everywhere.
No, sure. I just think it's interesting because, of course, I was there, and that experience was, and it's nice of you to share it because I know that it was just really amazing, and I think it was undeniable. And I bet you that a lot of people in their families have those things, whether you think there's a sign or I remember. Well, it doesn't matter, but I mean, the bottom line is I think there's a commonality to the experience, and I think it's really great that that we experienced that and that people are open to it, because who really does know? Unless you say the book does offer a physics explanation, but if you're Italian, you don't need a physics explanation. If you have a soul, you don't need physics to tell you that souls connect, and as you point out, it is really true because when I was writing Eternal, this crowd knows I don't write with an outline, and I always tell them the story about my life. And when I was writing the story, it's Elizabeth's story, and she has a very hard life, and bad things happen to her, and she has a bad mom, unlike the one I had, Mother Mary. And there's a point when she's writing a little book and she has an angel come in the book. And I didn't really know that would happen. I said, well, that's sort of interesting. And then I realized that this character who's the angel is really a little bit my mother, your grandmother. And that I remember these scenes that I started to find myself writing subsequent to her passing about just sitting at the table while she made homemade pasta, because though my mother was a secretary and smoked, and she wasn't like a pasta granny, she, made a point of making homemade pasta every Sunday. And I was with her. God forbid I would actually learn it. I never learned it, right? It kills us that we don't really know how she made gnocchi, or, even her tomato sauce, which was unbelievably great. I don't have a recipe for. But what I remember, and I know you remember too, because we spent plenty of Sundays, just you growing up, in the kitchen around a table dusted with flour. And this Nona character, who is kind of salty but extremely loving, suffuses eternal, and really in so many ways gives Elisabetta, the main character, the strength she needs to undergo hardship. And I think that's probably the best tribute to my mother everywhere, and that I've ever done, although I didn't intend it that way. And it's probably what, it's sort of nice to be able to I really am so proud of you, and to do this with you, that to a certain extent, here we are writing about family, being family. And I hope that people feel the warmth that and the gratitude and the love we have for them and for each other, and for this wonderful, thing that binds us together, which is books. That's why I say at the beginning, support Murder by the Book. It's not just about books per se. It's about the communication, how we write with an open heart, how we connect with each other. It is not an accident that Murder by the Book has built this incredible community, because you guys are members of that community. And I've been down there so many times, and Francesca, they've read our funny stories too. And we owe you all so much. And mostly, thank you for having us. And thank you for supporting this wonderful bookstore, because there's really nothing more important than people's souls connecting, even in a novel.
It's the truth.
That just came out of me. I don't know why.
No, it was totally great. I can't even improve on it. You're absolutely right. It's why I love to read myself. It's why I love to write. I think we really write to connect, and family can be a lot of different forms. And this can be, this wonderful bookstore has created a bookstore family around it. And I'm
right,
so
that's really true.
To be a part of it.
That's really true. So maybe we will turn it open to questions, because we want to we'll leave enough time, and John will come in and save us.
And so I just wanted to say, while you guys are talking about that, we also talk about kind of Murder by the Book family, and I'm so excited that, Lisa, and now you, Francesca, are both part of the Murder by the Book family. And like we said at the beginning, it's, that's the tough part about the virtual events, is that we don't actually get to get everybody in a room together and kind of experience a sense of community. But it's been really great to be able to kind of build that, and with people who we don't actually get to see through the pandemic. So that's also been kind of a blessing in this weird year.
Right.
So Lisa, you asked Francesca, but I want to ask you, do you believe in ghosts?
It's funny. I almost started to tell the story and I pulled back, but I didn't. I'm like her. I'm science oriented, but I will say that now you're really getting all our family stuff, but I've never.
Go for it.
When Francesca was little then, but she was in school that day. But when my dad passed, I was in the hospital that day. And we were surprised, actually. It was very unusual that he was supposed to come home in hospice. And all of a sudden, things started to go really south. And I was very close to my dad. And a happy Father's Day, Dad. And the moment he passed, I had a different reaction than Francesca, which may be why she thought her reaction was so opposite. I was even though it was the worst moment, I was suffused with my father always made me feel loved. The feeling, the story I think I've told at the bookstore, was when he would go to my signings and people would say, some lady said to him, "You must be so proud of her." And he said, "Lady, I was proud of her the day she came out of the egg." And that's the feeling that I always had from my parents, both of them, and him in particular. So the moment he passed, I was I felt all of that love. And it was weird. It was I was holding my stepmom, who was hysterical crying. My brother was there. He was upset. But I was okay, I just got that contact. And we stayed there and, said our goodbyes and everything like that. But until that experience, I know there's a whole nother plane. Yeah. It's crazy.
All right. So Debbie has asked, she says, Francesca, do you have any siblings that helped you write about sibling relationships, or did you use other methods to write about it realistically?
I am an only child. So I guess, it didn't seem incongruous for me, but I've gotten that question a lot too. Like, you don't have a sibling. I primarily wrote about the sibling bond here in this book, but I think it's like, what do we know better than that which we don't have, but maybe crave a little bit? I think I've always, I probably did always, I was actually a very happy only child, but if I ever fantasized about a sibling, it was an older brother. I think that fantasy of having that protective presence who can guide you and look out for you and be that best friend, that's what I really zeroed in on. And then in my upbringing, I did have step siblings, which I think were wonderful, but I also understood the tenuousness of it sometimes, or like that, it's not, it can emotionally be the same. Maybe sometimes it is or it isn't, or it just feels more vulnerable. So like that vulnerability, I think I was really able to tap into with this book. And I think it was so interesting what my mom was saying too, about that her main character, Elisabetta, has a fractured or difficult or tough, I was going to say terrible mom, but she's not terrible, whatever. I mean, she's a tough mom.
It's not a terrible mom.
And I wrote about a character who has a good mom, but who is really, their relationship is very, very fractured at the beginning of this book. And I think it's like, because we had the great moms in our lives, like I was so close to my mom, so close to my grandmother. It's like, we understand the fear of that loss, it's like, what if I didn't have that? How would I get through my life if I didn't have that? And the flip side with siblings, how would I live with it if I got to have it? So yeah, sometimes it doesn't, even it's very influenced by our lives, even if it's not the match, it can be the inverse.
Yeah. So for both of you, Francesca, you have this novel. You had been working on columns that had been collected with your mom. And Lisa, you touched on this a little bit. You had been doing kind of these domestic suspense and these thrillers, and then you're writing this historical. So you've both done these new books that are kind of different than what you were doing before. So what was the point that made you say, hey, I'm finally going to try this? Like, Lisa, when did you say, like, I'm finally going to write this historical book that I've been writing for 40 years? Or Francesca, when did you like, hey, I'm going to try this fiction? Let's start with Francesca.
Fiction was always the dream, and the essay and the books and the column were sort of the unexpected gift and the unexpected opportunity. So I really grew up a big reader. Of course, I was my mom's daughter, so like books were so big in my house, and worshipped fiction writers, and really always wanted to pursue that. So that was always like dream A. And I never thought I would write about myself because I don't think I'm interesting enough, but to make fun of myself, I was like, oh, that our family can do. Like, we are good at making fun of ourselves. And it seemed like initially this totally separate track, like never the twain two shall meet, and, I'll get to write my novel on the side. But actually, I do think I learned so much, like not only to learn the importance of just the economy of language, that like, there are some, many writers better than I have quotes, something like, if I had more time, I would have made it shorter. Like that, the pressure on both the newspaper column and just the essay books in general to tell something concisely, like it was all great skills to learn, getting the beats of the story out. And humor and tragedy, they're, the twin sides, right? Like there's tragedy, comedy is just tragedy plus time.
Right.
So, I'm writing this book, but I just mean it was all about the emotional experience of life, what influences us, the people we are, the identities that we build. It's all about family. This book, in Ghosts of Harvard, in a lot of ways, is a coming of age novel too, about a young woman coming into her own identity. She's defined herself relationally to her brother her entire life. First, am I as good as him? Then, am I as sick as him? And ultimately, she's going to have to figure out, who am I without him? And I think I got to have my own lessons in that, in writing my own identity building in a column over the course of 10 years.
And how about you, Lisa?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think there was part of, and me, so I'm not like the most secure. I wasn't really like, wow, I have this. I love what I've written, and I'm proud of all of my books. But they tend to, when I realize what Eternal would have to be about, it was bigger in scope. It was like, your basic thriller that I do takes place in like 3 days. I have a really hard time if it's like a week. I'm like, oh, this needs to move. And I love that about our genre. I never am bored by writing it or reading it. I love it. So when Eternal came along, I said, well, you're really going to tell the story of like the Ventennio, as it's called, the 20-year period of Mussolini's rule, because you as you know, with anything, if you're going to show what happens at the end, you have to show it. So, for example, the beginning of the book is the beginning of this 20-year period. There's great food, and the characters are going to eat the food. Now, that's there because that's part of Italy, but it's also there because later, when fascism comes along, and then the war and food is rationed, and then the Nazis move in, and the Nazis weaponize food against the ghetto Jews. I have to make you feel that deprivation. Francesca knows this quote. She can say it in Italian. The Dante quote, where he says, "There's no greater sorrow." You say it.
Oh, Mom, I don't have it memorized. I mean,
yes, you do. You know it.
I really don't.
I know. There's no sorrow greater than.
I remember in English, but
all right. Well, there's no sorrow greater than to look back, and when you're in the middle of a horrible time, to look back in happy times. And that was interesting to me in this novel, because think about the pandemic. Part of what the answer to your question is short is I said to myself, I finally worked up my courage to try to write this, even though it was bigger and not about, overtime, and also not just one family, but three, because it's really a story of three families. But I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sorry, you threw me off with that. For the record, I know Dante's Inferno in Italian well enough that I was able to supply this idea to my mom, but I don't have it memorized for years later.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I know what I was going to say is this. And this is what actually, to a certain extent, the beginning of the pandemic really got me thinking that maybe I should try this a little bit, because honestly, when the thing about history is what Faulkner says, it's not even past. And to a certain extent, when you're entering a historical period, you don't know that, right? When we were back February, March, my good friend got sick in December. She's like, I have this cough I can't shake. Well, then we find out 4 months later, it's COVID, and she's fine now. But so I thought that's who these characters are. They are entering fascism, and they don't know that what is going to happen, and that it will be something that people will study in 2012. So as soon as I understood that and sort of had it as an insight, I said, then you can totally write this book. Then it's no different from anything else you've done before. And it's killing you that you're not doing it. And it's going to kill you if somebody else does it and it's not you. Like, I have a little
bit what it was. That was really what motivated
me. The story. I couldn't even abide it. So it was really that I finally. But I do think, and for people who are listening, because I know you get a lot of people at the store who want to write and who are really thoughtful about what they read and want to write. And I really want to encourage them, and I know Francesca does too, because the truth is, like she said about our short columns, anything you write feeds, you're always teaching yourself to write on the job in public. And that is a great thing, also a little scary thing. That's what leads to the anxiety part. But all writing you do feeds into any other writing. Like, I have written all these novels, but I never could have written Eternal. Never in a million years had I not written them first. And that's why this story is layered. And the next thriller, the one I just finished, is different because I wrote Eternal. And so that's kind of what's so cool about it. You know that, John, because you're a student of this whole genre and beyond. You can follow, right, an author's first debut novel, the second book, the third book, see how they mature, see how they change, see how they follow out themes that interest them. Anybody can do that. Any reader can do that. And it's fascinating, really.
I had the idea for Ghosts of Harvard really shortly after graduating, but I actually think I had to sort of not only grow as a writer into the idea, but grow as a person into the idea. Yeah. And that's what I always want to say to aspiring writers too, that it's like, when you're ready, you know it. I mean, or not to say that it always feels like you feel like some sort of God-ordained moment to write. It always feels a little scary and hard. But it just means if you have been living life and taking the tough punches that life throws at all of us, and like, then you're learning story. You are learning character development. You are everything that you've gone through in your life, painful, positive, you can pour into fiction. And that's why it's such a gift and kind of so therapeutic. I didn't think I put any that much of myself my own issues into this book. And then I was like, oh, this whole book is about like my control issues and how like you wish you could control the people we love, but you can't. You can't behave perfectly to control them. You can't be so thoughtful and, over functioning to make everything turn out okay. We have to love people we can't control. We get to love people we can't control. And I did not learn a minute sooner than my main character that is actually a gift and not life's greatest cruelty. So, it's all useful.
And also want to add vis-a-vis I think everything you read, if you're writing, you should read.
That's true too.
Anything you read just really educates you. You pick up things that other authors do. You go, oh, that's really terrific, or look at that. And when you're writing, you go, God, wow, I didn't know that you could do that. You don't have to go to any special school. You really don't. I think our genre in particular is so welcoming to new writers. And we all really want to encourage new voices and a diversity of voice. Yes. So please do take encouragement from this. It's sort of nice to have the two of us because, in the end, you sit down with a white paper and everybody can do it and anybody can do it.
And I think it's great what you said, Lisa, about, the next book that you're writing is different because you wrote Eternal. It's always great to me, when you get to see authors who get to kind of take a little bit of a left turn and do something that's different than what they've done before. They take a break from their series character and they write a standalone, because then when they come back to that series or the things that they did, like you said, the books they're different and they're fresher and there's something like re-energized about those books afterwards.
I think that's really true because I remember I loved doing the series in Rosado and I'll go back to it. But when I started to do the standalone, so when I started to do this thriller after Eternal, I was like, oh, I would like to tell a little, you say, how was it different? Well, I wanted to have a little bit of backstory about somebody's family. And I thought I wouldn't have had that much before of that, especially in a standalone. You have time to do that in Rosado, but you don't have time otherwise. And then I was like, you can just, a sentence will do it. 2 sentences will do it because readers are so smart. They get it. They get it. And I said to myself, that's what I learned from writing Eternal.
So you both have mentioned being big readers. And Lisa, I know the answer to this already because like you said, we chat about books all the time. So what is something that you guys have read lately that you loved? And you're not allowed to say each other's books because we know you love each other's books. That's my one qualifier. So Lisa, what are you reading now? What are you loving?
Well, I guess I was on this historical fiction tear. And you'll probably have some of this, but I really think that, there's some really great women and men writing historical fiction. I'm reading now something called, I'm late to this party, but it's The Golem and the Genie by Helene Waker, which is sort of a historical mystery. She has a new one out, which I just ordered. And from an indie, I should have gotten it from you guys. But, I really am liking, I've loved Stephanie Drey's books. I've liked Kristen Harmel. The Book of Lost Names is one that I really like, and she has a new one out that I just am recommending called The Forest of Vanishing Stars, which is terrific. There's just so many. I mean, Christina Baker Klein, The Exiles, I loved. I loved randomly a book called The Lehman Trilogy, which I don't know if you have, but it's the story of the Lehman family. Or The Florios of Sicily, another story where there's the story of a country or a time period told through the lens of a family, an industrial family or a family involved in a business. It's sort of a subgenre that I'm kind of noticing and kind of loving. But I really do recommend this Golem and the Genie. Her new one's called The Hidden Palace, and I'm sure that'll be terrific. But it's very interesting historical mystery, like The Alienist, also a terrific novel, Caleb Carr, like that.
That's so cool.
One of the things I love about Lisa, for everybody who is watching, is that, Lisa actually, like she said, you have to read to write. But like Lisa actually loves this genre so much, and she reads in the genre, and whether people are her friends or they're new, she reads so well in the genre, and you don't see that all the time. So it's always nice to talk to somebody who actually reads the genre and appreciates it too.
I love it. I love our genre, and I love its breadth and I love its depth. So.
And how about you, Francesca? What are you reading and loving?
I probably bounce around from a lot of different genres, but I know David Baldacci is my favorite thriller writer I'm not blood related to. So I have a beach weekend coming up, and I'm going to take Gambling Man. I just love him. I really enjoyed Jodi Picoult's latest, The Book of Two Ways. It actually, it wasn't out when I was writing Ghost, but then they both came out around the same time and like have sort of similar explorations of life and death and alternate realities and the different, the different possibilities of those turning points in our lives. So I loved that resonance. I really enjoyed in that it was such a compelling read, but it was unsettling, was Rumaan Alam's Leave the World Behind. Is like an unsettling pandemic read because it's sort of about like something mysterious and maybe apocalyptic happening, but it was chilling and I could not put it down. And I also, The Hour of the Witch, which I grabbed.
Right. I should have said that.
Bojalian, that I've heard,
Terrific.
this is my first book of his actually that I read, even though he's so great and famous. And I just was completely like super sucked in. Again, I like when authors of other genres do historical because then it's like, it's a historical thriller. Like it's it's different. Just shit feels shaken up and fresh, and the pacing is so tight and interesting and different. So I'm really enjoying this Hour of the Witch.
You know what I should jump in to say? Another great friend of the store, Megan Abbott. I got an advanced copy of The Turnout, which is not until August. And, it's like the dark side of ballet. I think she's so good at that kind of like twisty, fresh. If you like Black Swan, it's like your kind of book. It's really kind
It's like dark ballet. I love that.
Dark ballet.
Sinister ballet. Why? I can never get enough of sinister ballet.
And we're so excited for everybody watching. We're actually going to be doing a virtual event with Megan on August 3rd, and we're super excited. We got Gillian Flynn to interview her, who wrote Gone.
That'll be great.
That's going to be a great chat. So Lisa, David wants to know, do you think that you'll tackle another historical novel, or was this like the one historical thing you really wanted to tell and you're good?
No, I'm too excited. I'm about to start the next one. I kind of have an idea that's grabbing me and I've got to do all my research. It takes a lot of research, but I really love it. As Francesca says, you get to read and it's kind of homework, but it's great homework. So I'm going to do another one.
Awesome. So you mentioned you've got a new standalone coming out in April, Lisa. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. I mean, it's called What Happened to the Bennetts. I got approval for my title. And it's about a family, the Bennetts. And one night they're driving along and they're the victim of a carjacking and their whole life goes upside down.
And how about you, Francesca? What are you working on next?
I am working on the next novel. It's different from Ghosts of Harvard. It's not a sequel, but it's a similar genre bender, a similar sort of like almost a modern Gothic fiction. Sometimes I think is what I'm writing. But if Ghost was something of like a meditation of grief and loss and how we move on from that, this is really my exploration of instinct, body, the ways that our body talks to us and remembers, and lust and desire and fear, and that those types of gut, when you just have a bad gut feeling. And I think we live, I thought of this, I'm exploring it all through the proxy of scent and perfume. I've been a perfume lover since I was a little kid, and I love the way that scent can evoke memory and fantasy in equal measure. And it really, it connects both to our most emotional brain and our most primal limbic brain. Ticks can smell. So I thought it was like this interesting way of exploring and then this past year where we were all forced to be separate from each other only made these feelings of that separation and through technology and screens more potent, because like here I am, I live in the city, I'm single, I've lived in New York for over 10 years, and I still use Google Maps to navigate. I find my food via Seamless and Postmates, and I'm looking for the love of my life by swiping on an app on my phone. And like, what are we losing when we don't have the smell test? We think that this technology is streamlining our lives and making our lives more convenient and efficient and smarter. But what is all that information we're missing? And what are all the ways that human beings communicate with one another that has nothing to do with words? So that's what I'm exploring in the new book.
Awesome. So last question before we head out this evening. So you mentioned, kind of the last year and the pandemic and crazy. What has that been like for you guys? Have you been able, like, since we've been home and people haven't been able to travel and stuff, have you been able to like sit down and focus and write, or has it been like just too much and you haven't been able to get anything done? Let's start with Francesca.
This was not the debut novel year that I imagined. Like I said, it had a lot of silver linings, and it also had a built-in perspective dose. So whatever I didn't get that I was imagining was a small heartbreak and a time of great heartbreak. So, but I will tell you honestly, I was a little freaked out. I was a little freaked out and a little like, what is going to happen in my life? But I mean, here I had like the biggest professional moment of my life from my childhood bedroom at my mom's, at least for part of it. I moved home and was like, what is happening?
Great.
Yeah, I can't say that I was also like always burning through the writing, but what I was most consumed with, I think the only thing that took away from the writing was reaching out to people through all these other ways. And even if it took away from my writing time, my God, I needed it. These virtual connections, these virtual events, the Zoom book clubs, the Facebook Lives that I did and that I did with my mom, I am so genuinely grateful to everybody who joined and connected to me that way, because otherwise it really would have been a heartbreak to just feel like this happened in a little canister and nobody saw it. But it didn't feel like that at all. It felt more connected and more engaged than I ever would have thought. And that this book was a little life raft to my soul. Like the excuse to promote it was my excuse to connect to people outside of my house. And
How dare you?
I know the other side of an Italian mother. She's like mad that I want to see anyone else. But now I'm writing. Now I'm grooving. I'm working, and it certainly gave you a lot of time to think.
Yeah, no, that was basically. I think I was just like everybody else in the world, just so sad and appalled and trying, to figure out what the hell was going on, and felt so much for people who lost so much. So it was a difficult time. I didn't really write very well during that time. I was distracted very much, but it was wonderful having her at home, and she made a fire for us all through the winter, which was great. So, I got I got my daughter home, and she loved every minute.
I did love every. I loved every minute. I did love every minute.
Well, and as I've been telling people, especially debut authors who have had a book come out in the last year, like you have like my official permission, like you get a do-over when the next one comes out. Like you get to have that big launch debut party that you wanted that you couldn't have. Like, you get to do all of that over. You could just treat the second
out on Cinco de Mayo. Like I was gonna have amazing margaritas, you guys. Like I would have been making margaritas for everybody. So yeah, we'd have for that alone. I have to.
Well, thank you both so much. Like I'm like, this has seriously been like one of my favorite virtual events I've done like in the last year. Like it's been such a treat to sit here and to listen to you guys chat. For anybody who has been tuning in, we have been chatting with Lisa Scottoline, whose newest release, Eternal, has been out for a little bit. We've got signed copies available at the store. Francesca Serritella's debut novel, Ghost of Harvard, is coming out in paperback officially tomorrow, so you can pick it up tomorrow if you didn't get it in hardcover. If you guys missed any part of the chat, once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it, so you'll be able to rewatch it again from the beginning. And while you were on the Facebook and YouTube channels, you can go back and see any of the other virtual events that we've done over the year. Francesca mentioned she was a big fan of David Baldacci. We chatted with him last week. He was in conversation with another author. So almost any mystery author that's had something come out in the last year, we have chatted with them. So you can check those out. Lisa, it was so wonderful to see you again. It's always great to see you. And Francesca, it's so great to finally meet you, even if we did it virtually. When the next book comes out, we will get you to Houston, and there will be margaritas afterwards. I promise.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, John. Give my love at the store, and everybody take wonderful care of Murder by the Book.
You guys take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you again, John.
Bye.